In Formula One, it's not only about the driver battle taking place on the grid, it's also about the fierce battle happening back at the team's factories. This development race between the teams has been quite fascinating to watch over the course of the first 5 races of the season, and in this episode, we want to investigate how the 10 teams stack up on pure pace. So, using our supertime data from Motorsport stats, we can accurately compare the performance of the cars across the season without the length of the circuits confusing the data. And joining me today to help shed some light and analyze how the teams compare so far in the tech development race is our Motorsport.com editor-in-chief, Charles Bradley. Charles, why don't you go ahead first and explain to our audience how this number crunching is done?
Okay, well, we take each car's fastest lap of the race weekend and express this as a percentage deficit to the quickest team, or as I like to call them, Mercedes.
Thank you, Charles. And with that explained, let's take a peek at how the teams stack up 5 races into the season. So here's the current season average with Mercedes out front. No surprise there. Charles, what does this tell us about this championship so far?
Well, it's amazing, isn't it? If you look at that top figure there, 100% is the outright best anybody could ever achieve, and there's Mercedes right there with 100.074, so that's as close to perfection as you can like. It also tells us about Ferrari and Red Bull, just how they're the only teams that are actually in the ballpark with Mercedes at the moment, but they're still, that tangible part behind. The other thing to consider as well is that Ferrari and Honda have both brought their first engine upgrades of the season already. Mercedes, we expect them to bring it at Canada, so that gap's there already. You can only think that's going to get even bigger. So then you look a little bit further back, you see the fantastic battle that's going on for 4th place and below, and it's just amazing to see how hard that battle is in the midfield. And then you look at the very back and you find Williams and you realise just how far off the pace they are.
Yeah, and you notice something quite interesting about the spread of the field at the front compared to the midfield.
Yeah, so the gap between Mercedes and Ferrari is 0.456%, but then if you look at the 6 teams from Haas down to Racing Point, that gap's 0.423, so you've got an even smaller gap between 6 teams than you have between the top 2.
Yeah. Now, how about we take a look at how the teams have done at each individual Grand Prix so far. Mercedes have pretty much dominated at every race aside from Bahrain, with Red Bull a consistent 3rd place across the first 5 races. But what's interesting to see is the midfield battle has been very competitive. What do you make of this data, Charles?
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing to see how close those guys are in that midfield position, as we said, from 4 right the way through to 9. My immediate hot takes, Haas have been inconsistent really. 4th on 3 occasions, but a couple of times their form's really gone off the cliff, and as we've known, their issues with getting the tyres into the temperature window has certainly seen a few problems there. Renault, this big budget team, it's factory force, you expect it to be easily in P4 in the championship. Again, they're all over the shop here. It's amazing how, the fact they were 9th quickest in Baku was, it's unbelievable for a team of their resource, really. And these inconsistencies have allowed McLaren, really, to, it's been like a free pass to get 4th in the Constructors' Championship at the moment. Look at their pace. Okay, they were great in Australia and Bahrain, but they've been a little bit down. And we heard Carlos at the weekend when he was talking about, we finished P8 with a car with no pace. It's very sort of Fernando Alonso thing to have said, really. And then we've got a team like Racing Point, which in Baku looked fantastic, didn't they? Sergio Perez doing his usual thing there. But elsewhere, they've really struggled to get that car to work too. So, and I think probably the most impressive contender of those whole midfield teams is just Toro Rosso. Just seeing that the way that they've, raised their game right the way through the season, they're in a really strong position right now.
Yeah, and the drivers have done incredibly well as well.
Yeah, totally.
McLaren, considering the pace they had last year, also a big jump there.
Yeah.
Really good for them.
Mm-hmm.
How would you rationalize that midfield battle? Because it looks like quite literally, no weekend has been the same across 5 races.
It's absolutely unbelievable, isn't it? You know, it's just all been all over the shop. Imagine if this was the battle at the front of the field. Imagine if this was that sort of random factor was at the front, that Mercedes and Red Bull and Ferrari and all these other teams were taking turns to be on pole position and saying fastest laps and everything like that. I think that would be the Formula One that we all would really love to see, wouldn't it? But I think it goes to show when you make an aero change, when you change the tyres, the thickness of the tyre gauge this year with the Pirellis, you just always see those big resource teams right at the top every single time. They've got the skill set, they've got the budget, they've got all those sort of modelling tools back at base, and they can just out-develop they're not minnow teams, but they're teams with good budgets, but they're just in a league of their own, really, those big three. But it would be great to see some of those smaller teams have a proper chance right at the front of the field.
Yep, and as you said, the competitiveness is what we'd all like to see return to Formula One.
And you want to see, when you see a team like Renault have the benefit of a full manufacturer budget, you want to see them get back to those glory years of the mid-2000s. And at the moment, they're the team that stand out for me, and I think these two charts really show it, that they've sucked.
Yep, and they were the ones who were supposed to be challenging the top 3 teams, and so far there's no real sign of that.
No evidence.
Well, thank you, Charles, for your insight. We always appreciate having you on the show. Here's again how the teams stack up so far this season on pure pace. We'll be reviewing how the order changes on a regular basis, so be sure to stay tuned to keep up with the 2019 F1 Tech Race. I'm Julia Piquet, and thanks for watching.